I'll share.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. We have Marta Muniz with me, who's going to speak about cities and the appeal of cities and why do people live in cities. So Marta, well, actually, I'll start here with a quick land acknowledgement. So I acknowledge that we live on Treaty 6 territory. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather in Treaty 6 territory is the traditional gathering place for many Indigenous people. We honor and respect the history, languages, ceremonies, and culture of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who call this territory home. The First People's connection to the land teaches us about our inherent responsibility to protect and respect Mother Earth. With this acknowledgement, we honor the ancestors and children who have been buried here, missing and murdered Indigenous women and men, and the process of ongoing collective healing for all human beings. We are reminded that we are all treaty people and of the responsibility we have to one another. So Marta, I'll pass it off to you. You can go ahead and load your PowerPoint up if you'd like here. Marta's been an instructor at MacEwan University here at the School of Continuing Education, teaching with the International Department, and she's taught geopolitics internationally, and her expertise in cities is cities and their municipal initiatives. She's developed projects for cities abroad with industries, Canada, SCI, Sustainable Cities Initiative, and other multilateral organizations. She holds a master's degree in political science from the University of Alberta and a specialization in United States politics. For the last 2 decades, she's participated in the UN Habitat World Urban Forums and witnessed more than 190 countries sign the new urban agenda at the UN Habitat Conference 2016 in Ecuador. So Marta, we're very excited to have you here to share some of your expertise, and we look forward to the conversation. Quick little housekeeping. So if you have anyone that has questions, please feel free to jump into the Q&A or in the chat and leave those questions there, and we'll get to them during the presentation, and then we'll have about a half an hour after to just engage in some conversation and ask questions. So Marta, I'll hand it off to you, and very excited.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for your kind introduction and all your support throughout preparing for this. Special thanks to MacEwan University for giving us this opportunity to talk about how to keep engaged, how to be involved in our lives. So here I am going to start with you, telling you that I've already been introduced, but I just want to add that I am really happy to be here with you having this conversation. It's been decades of love and passion for cities, and this is a great opportunity with all of you. I have been a researcher on cities. I have been a traveler around the world, especially for business and exchange of technology with cities. And I see the complexity of this phenomenon in the world. Cities are our true home. So this is our agenda for today. As Sean said, please type your questions on the chat. First, we're going to look at the world lives in cities. That's the main point of our presentation. And then we're going to dive into how big these cities are, who is in charge of managing these cities, to end with what's happening right now, which is the beginning of the future. So I invite you to join me with your experiences, with your comments, and especially with your questions. So the world lives in cities, and about 4.2 billion people, which is 60% of the population of the world today, live in cities. This is an incredible amount of people, because in 1950, which is only 70 years ago, 70% of the population lived in rural areas, only 30% in urban. 70 years after, but especially towards 2030, 70% of the population will be living in urban centers, especially cities, big cities, mega cities, and 30% will stay in the rural centers. This phenomena is unprecedented in the history of our planet. Scientists, experts have been studying with resources, science, experience, contribution from people. What happened? What happened in the 1950s that made people move massively to cities? We're still learning. However, now, as we'll see towards the end of the presentation, we have more knowledge, experience, and plans to make our cities sustainable. So what are the reasons people move to cities? There have been many types of questions like that. But at the end, this is what we have gotten. That the top reasons are, first, safety. Second, jobs. Third, education. And of course, lifestyle. Entertainment, theaters, movies, access to parks, access to airports, access to the things that a city can offer. So the global context for cities is the following. 60% of the people are living in cities. Interesting to say, of that, 40% are living in cities close to water, bodies of water, rivers, lakes, or the ocean. So anything that has to do with water impacts 40% of that 60%. Now look at this, only 2% of the land of cities, of the cities are, only 2% of the land are cities in this immense planet. But in the cities we have 70% of the economy, 60% of global energy consumption, and 70% of greenhouse gas emissions, and 70% of global waste. That's the situation of cities. And it's unsustainable. That's why experts around the world have been looking at this. With this map, which you will have an opportunity maybe in the future to see more carefully. Towards the end, from 60% to 100, which are the green shades of this map, are countries where people are living in cities. Only a few parts of the world still have rural areas to develop. Now, what is a city? And here we could have many hours to discuss. But what cities are now are not only the history of the planet, because people moved to this particular place and slowly made it grow and become a city. But now too, there are cities that have been planned by scratch, from zero. And there are names for cities. A city in a particular country, every country has big legislation about cities, could be from 50,000 people up. Mega cities are cities called over 10 million people, which are many in the planet right now. But there are also global cities, which are cities that are important to the planet. Places where we go, have conferences, study, create scientific development, and they are very important for the world of the planet. Here we have a view of those global cities. I will give you a few seconds to look at them, at those names. Cities that we hear all the time. So global cities mean that the term means that they are connected to each other. Mayors, presidents of those countries, they look at those cities as a network of support between themselves. and towards the city. They have common ground problems, issues, and solutions. Just to tell you a few numbers here, the population of the cities is just outstanding. Look, Tokyo has 37, let's say 38 million people in one city. Jakarta, 30 million. New Delhi, 25 million. Millions. In Canada, we have Toronto with 5.5 million, and Montreal, 3.5 million people. And we have Vancouver with 2.3 million people. Calgary, 1,200,000, Edmonton, just over the million. But the world has cities that really overcome the capacity to manage them. And people have a real hard time living in them. But there is no looking back. This urbanization of the planet is not reversible. I just put here the map of Canada to see where our big cities are too. Now, how to manage a city? And here we have not only the incapacity of governments to prepare for this amazing growth, but at the same time, the limitations of government structure to provide cities and their managers, their mayors, the city council, with the tools to provide for the cities. And in this case, there is a lot of political design for the municipal government. Because cities, to manage a city, we have, as in Canada and in many other countries, United States, South America, almost all countries of the world, with some differences, the city mayor, who is the maximum authority, elected by vote, the city council, who is by political terms the legislative arm of the city, and then we have the administration in the city manager, and everything around it. But the same is for Edmonton or Calgary with 1 million people than for the largest cities of 30 million, 25 and 40. What does the people in the city want? Well, the mandate is that we will have infrastructure, roads, buildings, schools, theaters, universities, bridges, connections to other places, that we have utilities, water, sewage, electricity, power, access to gas for our cars, jobs, business centers, capacity for them to transport their products and services, food, access to food, and of course, security. I like entertainment, but security, safety, police, instructions for people to know how to handle their lives in the cities. One of the things that have been affecting and making everybody look at cities is how climate change is impacting those cities. Made in concrete, high rises, skyscrapers, and of course, poverty. People from other countries moving to the big ones, looking for job and for safety. So we have increased heat, storms and weather, creating, real havoc in cities and countries. Not to talk about pandemic situations, and I promised myself not to mention the pandemic in this presentation because it's also the center of it. This pandemic has made us see how the world is interconnected. How many people live in a city? How many can die in a day? And I wanted to show you just a few pictures of cities because, we talk about them, but we have to see the magnitude of that. Look at this piece of land for New York. the buildings, the access to water, everything around it. And it's a city that can be called the capital of the planet. Everything about New York is like familiar to us. Look at this picture, my dear friends in the webinar today with McEwan University. This is Hong Kong. Look at the buildings, housing, wow, a place to live. Everybody wants a place to live. And cities have certain piece of land, and many have to grow high instead of to the sides. Look at the size of these buildings. How many people live? What is the size of those apartments? This is Istanbul. Istanbul. They had to construct a connection between two countries, two cities, and the best way was a highway on top of the cities. It's one of my favorite pictures about cities. This one, for example, is the city of Medellin in Colombia, surrounded by mountains. And people have begun to, many years ago, to develop neighborhoods in the mountains. That city won an innovation award worldwide because now they have trams to bring people from those mountains to the town to work and to enjoy and to maybe, go to the theater and movies or university and back to their neighborhoods. They also have created stairs, electrical stairs for the people, especially the adult and the children. But as I told you at the beginning, this situation has made countries even think ahead, and now cities have been built from scratch, not just slowly growing, but made in a plan, like this city that was created in Kazakhstan from scratch and now has 2 million people moving into it. There is another incredible situation that I heard, I don't have confirmation, that China has 17 cities in process, built from zero. And some of them are going to be called airport cities. The airport is the center. And around the airport, everything is going to be built. Universities, schools, housing, everything. So people will have the opportunity to fly from another big city or from another country to get to the airport and attend whatever is needed in the city and come back to their town or country. I wanted to show this picture because when I travel, I always get the airplane or the airline manual or advertising because they show where they fly. So when I see things like this and I see they all land in cities, cities are connected by different airlines of the world. Now, let's jump to the end so we can have a discussion and hear your comments. What is the future then? If you see the cities like we saw, well, for the last probably 10, 20 years, but especially 10, the United Nations took the leadership of creating sustainable development goals for the planet. And among those goals, one, which we're going to see in a second, is number 11, is about cities. But look at this, the population of the world by the year 2050 will be around 9 million, let's say 10 billion people. And that growth, as we can see here, will come from developing countries, including Africa, or especially Africa, as we see here. And we, you and I, read the news every day about immigration, people from different countries moving massively, looking for a better life in countries where they are not welcome. So here are the sustainable goals. I know you are familiar with them. This is how scientists, politicians, social experts, people who see beyond our present needs in a city, who see the planet are preparing for the transformation that this growth of population in urban areas is presenting. And there are 17 goals. I love the names. Let me just read some. Because the number 11 is sustainable cities and communities. But number 1 is no poverty. This is supposed to be for the year 2030. However, you know, we are advancing really fast, but no poverty. 0 hunger, good health and well-being, quality of education, gender equality, etc. But let's concentrate on number 11. And number 11 is the one that has dedicated billions of dollars, lots of consultants and experts from the world to study the future of cities. And that one is how to have sustainable communities that will provide for people to stay in their places. Final points, even though it looks crowded, but I just wanted to make it official from the UN. On the right side of your screen, it says 16% is the average global share of urban area allocated to streets and open public spaces. And then we also have under that 156 countries developed already national urban policies. And I will close with that point, right? Because we want to make cities human settlements that provide everything a person needs for their lives. And one of the things that we have now, and I want to invite you to follow, is the new urban agenda. It was signed in 2016 in Quito, Ecuador. 190 countries signed it. And the new urban agenda is 16 pages of incredible analysis about our population and how those billions are living in cities and what we have to do for them. Among the things that this agenda is going to address are, and I'm going to read it for you because I thought it was so precise, I didn't want to paraphrase. Ensure access to all to adequate, safe, and affordable housing. Provide services and upgrade slums. Provide access to safe, affordable, accessible, and sustainable transport systems. Improving road safety and expanding public transport. Strengthen efforts to protect and safeguard the world's cultural and natural heritage. And of course, everything that has to do with the city. I think I jumped here, I want to go back. See on the left of this panel, the pandemic has worsened the plight of slum dwellers. The majority of the more than 1 billion slum dwellers reside in Eastern Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Central and Southern Asia. All right, so with this, saying that we have to make our cities, sustainable and inclusive, safe, resilient, and especially a place to live happily, I conclude my presentation wanting sincerely to hear from you and thanking you for being here today. All right, so back to you, Sean.
Thank you, Marta. We have one comment/question here from Raquel. So she's asking, what do cities need? Jobs, roads, police assumes too much perhaps. Would it help to rather envision shelter, food, and culture, clean air, clean water, and adequate access to soil? Otherwise, cities remain a historical artifact of colonialism and capitalism. I always get confused about what we need to embrace from the past and what we need to reimagine. Now, Marta, I think, some of the stuff that you just touched on with the UN goals, speaks to this a little bit, but what are your thoughts?
What's the name of the person that wrote?
Raquel.
Raquel. Thank you, Raquel. You have put in a few sentences the core of the situation. because the cities grew in part because the business, the jobs, the industries were in cities and people had to come here to work. They say here, the city. So capital, the owners of the machinery, the owners of the factories, the owners of the capacity to give you a job made the cities a magnet for many people. If they would have had those things in their rural places, for sure they wouldn't have come. And at the same time, salaries were not or have never been precisely sustainable. So people have a difficult life in the city. They move many times without education, many times with 3 little children and a wife that has to take care of them, and they slowly become poor. And that is, in a few words, what has happened to cities. We see these big, beautiful pictures and we imagine, wow, there must be, economic development. But there are billions who have just enough to eat today, just enough to pay their rent. And that is the big issue that we are addressing at this, 2021, before 2030, and even before 2050, that we have to really serve those who are in need. The children especially, education, food, safety, parks, and entertainment. And then also the adults, the seniors, and the people who need mobility. Did I answer this question to you? Because really governments have to intervene to make sure that the salary, the access to a house, the capacity to have transportation and mobility is offered equally to everybody. So can you see if Raquel has anything to add?
No, Raquel said thank you. She's also wondering if there was a link for the 16-page document that you had introduced previously.
Oh yeah, right. Wow. Oh, we'll do it in a second, okay, when we answer other questions. Any other question, Sean?
Well, there's a few comments in the chat here. One note about China having a number of ghost cities, which I think is something that is becoming an issue there as well, and also the debt that developer debt in China for probably associated with a lot of these ghost cities too as well. So there's just some comment about that, drawing attention to it, and also and I think this speaks to the sustainable city goals. What does that include? How do you allocate green areas, or at what point does just a concrete jungle become unsustainable, right?
Yeah, well, China, and like in many things, we don't know exactly what's going on in countries, and ghost towns are maybe we can say also with great respect and care. In Canada, for example, we hear from the communities where the Aboriginal people live, and they haven't had for the longest time access to everything they need. So they could stay in their place and they develop the town or the city or the community. So they have to come to the larger cities. And sometimes, like we see, they cannot fit. It's not the place for them to be. The same thing with ghost towns. All of a sudden, people want or need to stay there, but there are no resources, no capacity to stay, so the industries don't go there. There's no university, there's no airport, like we mentioned before, no access to the metro or the buses or higher education. The problem is not simple. It's not simple. So, but let me just jump in here about green areas. When a government of a city, when we vote and elect a good mayor, and he has clarity on the sustainability of a city, we hear stories that are examples of wonder and fascination. There are cities where I could tell you names, but let's just in general, where the mayor has to fight with a team of lawyers to convince the government to let them create a park so that children could go to that place. But then you have to fight against a factory, the owners of a business, against families who have houses that they don't want to sell. And in many cases, those mayors who I have been invited to hear in international conferences, they tell you the fights and the success. When finally you get all the money you need and you create this park and you can ride your bicycle and you can go in your skateboard and the children enjoy for the first time a green space in a city. Let me add, for example, with Canada, we moved around the world with an initiative called Sustainable Cities Initiative. We were promoting businesses. We wanted to promote Canadian technology. So we went to the cities and asked for something that I haven't mentioned here because it's like opening the Pandora box. The planning department of a city. The planning department, that's where everything happens. That's where the mayor, the city council, and everybody in a city develop the future of it. And in some places, that planning department is old, without vision, and just used to the same old, same old. But when a mayor, with the support of, let's say, the province, in our case in Canada, in other places, the state, and the national government, and the multilateral organizations like the UN, envision the change of the city, they make incredible things. Barcelona is one of those examples. Barcelona was a city in the middle of walls. It's a walled city from the history of Spain. And couldn't contain its growth anymore. Poverty, illness, crime. Crime is another issue that I didn't even want to put here because that's like, what? Crime is one of the main issues of a city. But Barcelona couldn't stand one more person. It took a decade of fighting and international support to tear down those walls and open the city. And they did. They let go of historic walls, opening roads and creating a space around the city. And Barcelona, in a few years, became an obligated center to visit. Tourism, political analysis, vision for planning. I can tell you stories after stories. There is one that takes my breath away. When I went for the first time to Waterloo, one of the cities in Ontario, the city was included in the Forbes magazine as one of the best run organizations in North America. The city of Waterloo, from the mayor all the way down, all officials had a PhD. And their main objective was, how do I make every day this city livable for our people? University cities, like Edmonton has many universities. McEwan University is in the center of downtown. We have to create an opportunity for everybody to move around the city and have access to universities. But at the same time, what are the conditions? Cities like Boston, Edmonton, other cities of the world, they have a full brochure for international students. How do you behave during the weekends? How do you begin to know and understand the conditions of the city? And they involve them in the city in the first year of the university career. And many of them stay, which is the objective. They stay in the city, they get married, and they have a life and a career. So any more comments or anybody who wants to add?
Yeah, so we have a good question here from I think it's Giles. Can you say a few words about how zoning has influenced or our present model of suburban development, and what are the possibilities of creating a new type of zoning that ensures sustainable forms of development?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, zoning. That's what I was talking about, the planning department, right? For the view of the land, the view of the people, number one, and then, of course, industry and other development. The planning department, as I mentioned before, in many cities have changed the way they divide the land for the future. Some of them, for example, some cities had already industrial land. The zoning was dividing, especially the north side, because it's closer to the river, closer to the lake, for industries that require fresh water for the process. That's against everything we're talking about, because many of those industries pollute the water. They destroy the river. They create floods and environmental disasters because it wasn't planned properly. Cities down the river begin to suffer because now they have to clear the water before it's ready for consumption. And it's an escalation of problems. Zoning, thank you for that question, is fundamental. One of the things about the new urban agenda, and I'd like to, let me invite you for this, about the link to the new urban agenda. The new urban agenda has been translated to 37 languages. It is a small booklet the size of a mini iPad. Every word weighs a ton. It connects all the legislation that the world has created for cities into this document, so you can go and you want to talk about zoning, you want to talk about oil and gas, you want to talk about new parts, every subject that you're interested in, you will find it in this document. Now, I have to add, besides being the main, let me find a good word, the blueprint, besides being the blueprint for the sustainability of cities, the new urban agenda has also created groups of special interest. In one conference that happens every 2 years, to which I've attended for about 20, called the World Urban Forum. And the World Urban Forum, the number 11, every 2 years happens, and the next one is next in 2022. And I would like to promise, Sean, that we'll send the link with the video if they require, or just a link about that. It will take place in Poland. And the last one was 2 years ago, just when the pandemic was beginning, and I didn't want to risk it, in Abu Dhabi. And previous to that, it was Kuala Lumpur. In Kuala Lumpur, the last one I attended, we were 25,000 experts in cities sitting for 11 days in this amazing city of Kuala Lumpur. From 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., conferences, examples of people advancing, sharing of knowledge, creating community, creating networks, and that is happening right now. If we have in this conversation any person from a particular city and is interested in inviting their mayor or their city councillors to this event, please do. The government of Canada was present for the signature. We signed the agreement of the new urban agenda. I highly recommend any person, political scientist or social scientist, interested in helping this amazing transformation and creating a better life for the people in the cities, to get access to that document. So you can just go UN Habitat New Urban Agenda. New Urban Agenda, UN Habitat. All right. Any more questions, Sean?
Yeah, so Marta, you spoke a little bit about this already, and the importance of, surrounding ecosystems and watersheds. So Dave here is saying, thinking of Alberta, is territory, so regional development management, the central issue and an opportunity. The city structure is part of this bigger concept, how we utilize the ecosystem best is the goal: water, land, food, energy, etc. So yeah, I mean, you spoke a little bit about this already, but I'll let you comment further.
Well, Alberta is a lab of all these issues. It's a laboratory of all these issues, because oil and gas is the basis of the economy. And oil requires a lot of impact on the environment. At the same time, it has created great development in environmental laws, technologies, policies, etc. But we have to take care of the province, and we have to take care of the land for now and for the future. And one of the, let's say, incredible differences in political ideas is precisely what to do. Because Alberta has to diversify the economy. It's going to happen sooner or later that we have to have a transition to cleaner energies. And Alberta is preparing, because I know hydrogen is becoming part of the conversation. How are we going to recover lands that has been impacted by the environmental issues of the oil and gas industry? How we keep wealth and progress happening in the province, but at the same time keeping the cities where the people are living protected. Even rural areas, because Alberta is one of those places outside the planet where we still have powerful rural communities. We also have the best parks. Edmonton has the, how can I put it, the largest river valley trails system in North America. Who would have thought that that's true? The Saskatchewan River is vital for the future of the city and of the country and of the province. So I think, in the future, and this maybe will be my pitch for all of you. Again, great, and thank you for having you in this conversation. Run for mayor, run for the city council. Position yourselves in the school board. Make sure that you create an NGO where you are going to do your own service to your community. Participate as a volunteer in different organizations that are really looking at how to solve issues of the people in the cities. When the new mayor in Edmonton took office, it was surprising to hear his first two big speeches were, number one, Amajit Sohi is an incredible mayor. He's going to give us a new opportunity. And the first thing he talked about was race. How to give everybody equal opportunity, equality, right? And the second thing was homelessness. Homelessness. We have a wealthy province and we have people still sleeping on the street, and we don't have enough food and housing. I like to say that young people are incredibly connected and engaged. My 3 children, and I have 6 grandchildren, my 3 children are very involved in the community. They work in different organizations as volunteers to serve. It makes me proud of them and of the many young people that do the same. Now, as political scientists like me, or a person like you, or an international student, or someone who works for a city in Ontario or in Alberta, we have to talk, we have to speak up. And the new urban agenda will be a perfect Christmas gift for your mayor and the director of your city planning office. It's a different view of everything. Sean, something more?
Yeah, I comment of my own, I suppose. The density and tax base of cities seems to be a big factor in, being able to achieve sustainable development goals and, provide services. And definitely, here in Canada and Alberta particularly, you know, we're very used to this sprawl model, right? And I know that for many years, Edmonton and Calgary and larger cities have been trying to, you know, with strategies for infill and to increase density. But, you know, I think there's really that cultural challenge where, you know, here in Alberta, we're used to wanting to have a little bit more space. And, you know, there's definitely implications with that. So, you know, I think, you know, for me, I wonder what are the convincing
arguments,
elements, right? Yeah. So, you know, to sell people and our communities on, you know, density without it looking like a negative.
Yeah, but here, this would be a good point also to touch. And I'd love to hear from other people if they are here. If you become a citizen of your city and you are in love with your city and engaged in the life of the city, you won't move out of the city. You may travel and go to different places, but you will have your home and you will finish your career there and you create your business there. So I think belonging, you know, the sense of belonging to the city. When you belong to the city, then you begin to know about it, and then you elect good mayors and city officials, and political strategies are important for the future. But you have to be part of the city, and then the city itself changes everything. I have a little story I like to add about that. And, you know, sprawling Sean was a big mistake, and it was moved by money. Of course, people who had the money, they didn't want to live in a downtown that didn't have investment, so they began to build this. They gave free range to real estate developers, and they began to develop outside of the city, wealthy or middle size and middle wealth communities. But the city has to still bring them utilities and roads, and it's expensive. So they suck, let's say, a lot of the budget for the future development of the cities. But let me just say that some cities have really developed future views involving people. There is a story about Phoenix, one of the cities in the United States, compared to Philadelphia, another big city. Philadelphia has a large amount of people living every year. They leave Philadelphia and they move to other cities. And Phoenix is one of those cities that have income of young, talented artists, people who have a PhD, people who have a master's degree. They want to live in there because Phoenix offered a great opportunity for people to develop their talents. And they give them opportunities of all kinds, you know, money, loans, places, community groups, a connection to technology. Cities are fighting to have good citizens coming over. Of course, we have to also care for those, for example, who leave Africa in a boat, cross the Mediterranean, risking their lives to land somewhere in Europe. Italy or Greece or somewhere, by millions, looking for a good opportunity for their lives with no money, no education, even no language. And these countries have to have something. They have to look at humanity more than money and receive those millions of people in the country. There is a situation right now in a country of in a city north of Mexico, where one of the international bridges connects to Texas. It's difficult to talk about this. 70,000 people, more or less, a year are sent to jail, drowned, or sent back to their countries because they want to pass to the United States. And no visa, no passport, no money, no language, no education, and they risk their lives to do it. It's not because they want to die. They want to have an opportunity to have a good life. That city is called Reynosa. Reynosa has one of the worst urban situations because there is no green land. It's when people want to have a park for their kids, they get a grant to spend some hours in Texas. I don't know if it's still happening, but it happened when I was working with the city, with the government of Canada to help that city. The speed of buses at the bottleneck traffic moments was 10 kilometers per hour for about 3 hours. The city was completely dead for traffic, lack of transportation system, mobility systems. And like that, there are incredible stories to share. Oh, I can do that, says the mayor, or others say, oh, please help me, I cannot do this anymore. But especially capital cities need extra help. Hi, Sean, any more?
Yeah, Marty, you make a good point there about the importance of creating cities for people, right? I think we've seen there's a lot of cities around the world that have been created for transportation, or and you shared the example of an airport city, and I think like especially in areas like urban areas like Los Angeles and California, where there's massive infrastructure deficits that are coming into play with how these cities were built for vehicles first. But I really like your point that building cities for people that gives them a reason to stay and want to stay and build their family and build their career and be invested in it. So that's a great point, and I thank you for that. We have another comment from Giles here. What would we need to get neighborhoods more involved in urban redesign? Is giving neighborhood associations more power in local land use, as in creating community gardens or more bicycle paths, a good strategy?
Well, thank you for that question, because the community itself cannot. Maybe you can do something small, but you have to connect with a network of special people within the cities or within the province or even international. You have to get other eyes and money to come and help you with that vision. We are at that in such a state that a community, even a ward, because we are divided, for political reasons, for electoral reasons in wards. Even a ward that is not small, it's a big, containing several neighborhoods. They cannot. Maybe they could a little bit, but they cannot really get the big picture without having support. One of the things that I love is that in Canada, in particular Alberta, there is a network of mayors, because we have a metropolitan area and a greater Edmonton, and we have regional views, right? For example, Leduc is our airport city. And that city has begun to see a lot about how the airport is going to be the source of progress and development for the future. And cities like Red Deer, that we know how important it is in the middle of two great urban centers like Calgary and Edmonton. If we could have a fast train connecting those three cities, it's always been in the making. But it cannot be done by Calgary, it cannot be done by Edmonton, it cannot be done by Red Deer, it can be done by the three coming together. It can be done by the province looking at the future. Just using an example of it. But communities can do a lot, especially neighborhoods that are not too large. But I would recommend, from my experience, to get out of the view of your region, of your space, and connect with other organizations, with other communities, work together, elect a city councillor, make him be your voice within the city or within the province, and even in the legislature. Talk to your MLAs, tell them what you want, connect. We need extra help. Sometimes, a small would be okay and be nice, but it's not enough. My point of view.
Wonderful.
So,
We have one more question here from Raquel. She's wondering, would you happen to know if there is data on how likely cities are to be captured by developers, or strategies for remaining independent and focused on the people?
Repeat. For developers, or real estate developers, or for people, government people?
Yeah, I think her question is more alluding to, just citizens. Is there strategies that we can, deploy to remain independent, so that our levels of government, our planners are remain focused on the people rather than the interests of the developers and the businesses, if they, are in conflict with the sustainability of the city?
Great. Well, Raquel, I love your questions and your comments and your view. Come to Poland next June 2022 to the World Urban Forum 11. You don't have to pay to be part of it, only your ticket and your hotel. What happens in those meetings, and that's what the UN is doing, is showing everyone from any city, community, small, big country, what's happening. So you have an opportunity to see examples. And then you create a network. You contact someone. You invite him to your community. And then, maybe even you get resources for it. Let me tell you one, I won't mention the name of the town, but there was a small town that went to the Kuala Lumpur event from Canada. And when we were talking in one of the main events about how we have to think of the poor and the newcomers and the immigrants and the Aboriginal people and etc., and people who have disabilities, etc., those who really need a different view from the government, that person who was a member of a city planning department said, I have nothing to do here. In my town, we only build big, wealthy communities. Everybody who comes to live in our town has to have $250,000 to $300,000 for a home. So in our town, we never have people like that. And of course, the discussion was really important because her honesty, her transparency, her integrity in saying that made us see, as Raquel is asking, that sometimes there is no political desire to help, to make the city accessible for everybody, to make the city sustainable, to make the city open for everybody. So let's close with that. It's our last minute. Thank you, everybody, for coming to McEwan University's webinar. This will open, I hope, in your hearts many Pandora boxes. No, how do I get involved? How do I find out what my city is doing? How many people in my town, in my city are really poor? How many women cannot work? How much money you have to pay to really have a university?